Good evening, barflies and lounge lizards, and tonight we'll be discussing my favorite 80s sci-fi robots. Except for one exception, this is only live-action robots. Maybe animated ones will make the next list, but they won't, because I already have it written down. And number 5 on the list is Hector from Saturn III from 1980. And Saturn III is a British sci-fi film that stars the not-quite-British Farrah Fawcett, Kirk Douglas, and a perfectly normal-sounding Harvey Keitel. No reason to think otherwise. And it tells the story of a couple of scientists in the distant future who work alone on the third moon of Saturn at a hydroponics station. Well, back on Earth, perfectly normal-sounding Harvey Keitel, who just happens to be a bit evil, assumes someone else's identity and heads for Saturn III. And with him he has Hector, a demigod series robot whom he accidentally transfers his homicidal tendencies. I said homicidal tendencies. Hector was a great, really unique design. Kind of a mixture of a non-human robot like Gog with an almost Star Wars-esque droid. And just look at those abs. Now, info on this one was scarce, but we're going to try anyway. Hector stood at about 8 feet tall and reportedly cost about $1 million to build. But the film's budget only being around $10 million, I'm not sure that's the case. Which is basically true for everything I'm about to say. Complete nonsense. Hector was modeled by Colin Chilvers, a special effects artist and director. As an effects artist, he worked on Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, Superman 1, 2, and 3, and Condor Man. As a director, he did 5 episodes of Superboy and 3 episodes of the 1988 War of the Worlds TV series. Iron Horse for life. But back to Hector. It took several people to operate our homicidal robot buddy. According to IMDb, that number was 20, which sounds a bit high to me. But if anyone knows for sure, do let me know. That's all I got. And number 4 on the list is Ed 209 from RoboCop from 1987. And we all know the plot of RoboCop, right? Basically, Buckaroo Banzai gets really messed up by Red Foreman, and against his will, he's turned into a cyborg, all Eliminator style, even though Eliminators was first, as I'm very quick to point out. Well, Ed 209 was basically the prototype of the robot cop that kind of came before RoboCop himself, and Ed 209 kind of didn't work too well, and so that's why they went ahead with the RoboCop program. I have always loved the Ed 209 design. It was so cool. Even though in the movie the Ed 209s weren't really that capable, it was just still such a cool looking design. And I know some of you are already probably saying, but Sterling, you magnificent bastard, why isn't RoboCop himself on the list? Because RoboCop is a cyborg. It's not a robot. It doesn't count for this list. Now, preliminary sketches for the development budget of the film were by stop-motion animator Phil Tippett. But actually creating Ed 209 himself, from what I understand, it was a team effort, but the bulk of that really came down to a Craig Davies, who was inspired by killer whales and some kind of jet. And I can see that in the design, that kind of killer whale. It does kind of oddly come through in the Ed 209 design. And Ed 209 was voiced by executive producer John Davidson. And I remember when the cartoon came out, they finally did an Ed 209 toy, the one with the cap gun, the cap firing. So they called him Ed 260, and I even think they called him ED 260 in that. I was not having that, I'll tell you that. No sir, he was Ed 209 in my book. And number 3 on the list, and this is the only animated entry on the list, and I allowed this one because it is from an actual film, and that is Robot from Heavy Metal from 1981, which is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, animated film of all time, in my humble opinion. Now, he was voiced by John Candy, and had this great kind of old school look mostly, but then these giant cone type ears, just very expressive. And he appeared in the segment So Beautiful and So Dangerous about an alien abduction gone very right. Now, you'll probably want to skip ahead about 10 seconds if you haven't seen Heavy Metal, but something that really stands out about this one is its case where the robot gets the girl, and it's a very memorable scene of the robot getting the girl. And this is a fantastic film to just truly capture the spirit of the French magazine in which it is based, Metal Hurlant, and it was based on a, do you like that pronunciation? It was probably pretty terrible. But it was based on a comic strip by Angus McKee. And I've just always loved heavy metal and always loved that robot. And you can just never have enough John Candy. Even though he was in the movie earlier voicing a different character, he could have voiced all the characters, in my opinion. And on that, we're going to take some kind of break.
Here comes the gorgeous ladies of wrestling.
Hi, I'm Tina. I'm into fast men, fast cars, and life in the fast lane. But you know what really revs me up? Gorgeous ladies of wrestling. It's here every week on this station.
Suicide Hulk Hogan and Mr. T, here comes Glow!
Those gorgeous ladies of wrestling are coming your way today at 10 on WTXX, Channel 20.
And we're back with number 2 on the list, and that is Data from Star Trek The Next Generation, which premiered in 1987 and was played by the fine actor Brent Spiner. And Data was a sentient android that was discovered by Starfleet on Omicron Theta. He was the sole survivor after an attack by the crystalline entity, and he was an officer on the Enterprise. He was lieutenant commander. And the show kind of, even though it was an ensemble cast, it kind of followed Data's journey on becoming more human. And he was easily my favorite character on the show. I admit I was late to the party, but Star Trek Next Generation was the first Star Trek series I ever watched. And between Data and Worf, those were my characters. And the thing I think I like so much about Data is he brought most of the humor onto the show. And he had a cat named Spot. I mean, come on, a robot and a cat person? I mean, that is basically me in a nutshell. And with stuff like Star Trek, the kind of, I don't want to say freak of the week, because Star Trek wasn't a freak of the week, but a done-in-one type show generally. To me, it needs humor. Those kind, unless it's very plot-heavy and goes from one to one, with very episodic, I need a bit of humor to get through, and that's what Data brought. Now, normally I don't care for the more humanoid-looking robots. Thus why someone like Bishop, even though Bishop is a fantastic character, just why Bishop's not on this list, because aesthetically that is not the kind of robot or android I dig. But with Data, since he had the weird yellow eyes and the kind of off-color skin, you could tell he just wasn't a human, and that kind of made him cool. And again, it's Data, one of the greatest Star Trek characters of all time, and just one of the greatest androids of all time. Now, Brent Spiner was actually inspired by, ready for me to take it all the way back, Robbie the Robot. And when he was doing scenes, he would actually say to himself, how would Robbie the Robot handle this situation? See how I did that? I mean, that's just fine YouTubing right there. You're probably thinking, Sterling, you magnificent bastard, you. That's some fine YouTubing right there. And now it's time for some honorable mentions. And the first honorable mention is Bubo from Clash of the Titans from 1981. Now, it's debatable whether or not this charming little fellow is a robot or not, but I could already hear the angry typing of angry randos complaining he wasn't on the list. So here he is. And of course, the stop motion effects of Clash of the Titans were by the great Ray Harryhausen. But because the film was running a bit behind schedule, Harryhausen handed Bubo over to Stephen Archer, who did most of the Bubo scenes. Archer doesn't have a long resume, only 4 credits to his name, but the credits he does have are pretty darn spiffy. And that is, of course, Clash of the Titans, The Gate Part 2, The Neverending Story, and probably most important, Crawl. Now, it's been said that Bubo was made to cash in on R2-D2, but Harryhausen himself has refuted this, saying that Bubo was created before Star Wars was even released. And the next honorable mention is The Terminator, which I was actually going to save for a 90s Sci-Fi Robots episode, but I don't think I'm going to do that one now. So no Terminator for you. Sorry about that. And number 1 on the list, and the one I'll probably get the most complaints and arguing with, and that's Tom Servo from Mystery Science Theater 3000, which premiered in 1988. I think you all know the plot of Mystery Science Theater 3000. A good-natured janitor gets shot up into space because of his jerky bosses, and he builds two robots to keep him company, and together they watch B-movies that his jerky bosses make him watch. And it evolved and went for years and years and years. And I'll say this in advance, I like Joel, I like all the hosts, but I'm a Team Mike kind of guy. And to me, it's the Riff Tracks guys, Mike, Kevin Murphy, and Bill Corbett. That's my Mystery Science Theater 3000 group that I like the best, and Kevin Murphy is my favorite Tom. And you just gotta love Tom's design. I mean, it's a gumball machine head with a barrel body, no eyes or anything, and he's just a wacky little guy. In the original pilot, though, Tom was a silver robot named Beeper, and he spoke in beeps and whistles. I didn't know that. Never seen the pilot. Thought that was pretty interesting how he evolved from Beeper into Tom Servo. And of course, the thing I liked about Tom too is, Tom liked the ladies. He was definitely the sleaziest of the bots. Now, when Kevin Murphy initially took over the role, there was a little bit of backlash, and he actually got an anonymous, not letter, an anonymous 6-foot-long banner that read, "I hate Tom Servo's new voice," in the mail. And Kevin Murphy was so tickled by this, they actually hung the banner in his office, and it hung there for quite some time. As to Tom's fate, he was apparently destroyed in episode 1101, Reptilicus, and he was replaced by a clone of himself. That's kind of funny considering something I don't want to mention because that might be a spoiler for someone that hasn't seen something else on the earlier in the thing. But if you know what I'm talking about, I'd be pretty impressed. But if you know what I'm talking about, you know why that's funny. And that's all the time we have for this week. So please like, comment, subscribe, and keep it wacky. Oh yeah, and Tom had an extensive underwear collection. The end.